I first heard about Sainte-Madeleine here in about 5 years ago. I spoke to people like Harry Pelche and Joe Van and Dave Janai and other people from around here. And I heard about this community that once stood on these grounds. The history of Sainte-Madeleine was nowhere to be seen. It was disappearing. The memories, the history that was here only existed in the hearts and minds of the people who lived here during the 1930s. And I thought that it was quite an interesting story, and it was a story that was worth preserving.
Today only a cemetery marks the village of Sainte-Madeleine. In 1938, the Government of Canada designated the land for common pasture. The school, the church, and the houses were torn down, and the Métis families who lived there moved away.
The Métis were born as a people in the early 1800s, in the late 1700s and the early 1800s. And people referred to them as half-breeds, Métis, Métis. Some people call us Métis. Some people call us Métis. Tabrasala li Métis. À Saint-Laurent, moi, où je viens, on s'appelle les Métis. C'est pas à l'entour de Sainte-Madeleine, ça s'appelait les Métis, ben non les Métis, ben non les Métis. Peut-être bien que vous savez mieux que moi. Les Métis. But they were born in the early 1800s. They've been called all kinds of names, bad ones and good ones, over history. So going back now to the early 1800s, in 1816, the Métis declared themselves to be a people, a nation of people. And they had their own flag. That flag was first adopted by the Métis as a nation in 1816. And so they were a people. They weren't just a mixed-blooded people. They weren't just a mix of English and Indian, or Indian and French, or Indian and Scotch. But they were a people in themselves. They were a nation of people, a nationality. And they were the majority in the Red River settlement. There was, in 1870, when Manitoba became part of Canada, the total population was about 12,000 people. And about 10,000 of those were Métis. And the Canadian government was going to take over the West. And they sent their surveyors out west, and they were going to subdivide the land the way that they were used to subdividing it. But there was already people living here. The land was already subdivided in different ways, in river lots, not in sections. And so you've probably all heard of the great Métis national hero, Louis Riel. Went to meet those surveyors, and he stepped on their surveyor's chain, and he says, "You go no farther until the federal government has dealt, the Canadian government has dealt with the land rights of our people." And they formed a provisional government. And Louis Riel became the president. He wasn't the first president. The first president was John Bruce. He resigned after a few months, and Louis Riel then took over. They negotiated the entry of Manitoba into Confederation, into Canada. Now, in that agreement that they had with Canada, it's called the Manitoba Act. It was the Canadian government guaranteed that the Métis would be able to hang on to their lands, the lands that they occupied at that time. Many of your ancestors had received, or were supposed to have received, lands in the Red River settlement. And when they were denied that land, they had to move away from there. And some of them went to North Dakota, and they came back through the Turtle Mountains, and they ended up in Sainte-Madeleine, where once again they settled. And they had land, and that land was in their name. Until sometimes during the 1930s, when once again all kinds of games were being played that led to those same people that had lost their land in at the Red River settlement also lost the land here in Sainte-Madeleine.
I was born actually just 3/4 of a mile in that bluff back there where our farm was, and Dad was I would say the last one to leave this community, because he wouldn't leave because he owned the land. The rest of them, most of them others were squatters, and they weren't, but Dad's land was expropriated, and therefore we were the last to leave. I remember old Pitchy Seymour, he's the one that rolled up the wire, and he was crying his Sabden la pen monum. He just, all the time he was rolling up his wire, he was in tears because we were being moved out.
Probably was wrapped between the foundation and the first plank.
The PFR came about by the fact that there was everything was in a depression. I mean, so like everybody was going through hard times, and I guess the federal government thought, well, we should turn these pastures which were unproductive, it's mostly submarginal land, should be turned into a community pasture for cattle grazing. It's unbelievable that the hardship and difficulty that these people went through, you know, like it was sad, you know, when they left, just thinking that after all these hardships, you know, that they should find themselves out without a home, you might say.
Mom told me about St. Madeleine about 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know she had lived in this area before, you know. And until about 5 or 6 years ago, as I said, that she saw the piece in the newspaper about St. Madeleine, and there was a book being written about it and so on. Ken and Victoria Zelig were writing the book along with the elders, interviewing the elders of the area, and Joe Venn and so on. And that's when she told me, she says, oh, I'm from St. Madeleine, did you know that? I said, no. I said, where's St. Madeleine? Like, I didn't even know. I never even heard about it. Yeah. You know, and I guess that's part of the history that was lost maybe at one, you know, for a period of time. I didn't know anything about it. Yeah. The people that, they hadn't seen each other for 40, 50 years, you know, I was amazed with the memory that these elders have. You know, some of them left when they were 6, and some of them left when they were 5. My mother was 10 years old when she left. And yet she was going around here yesterday, you know, just going up to someone, and, you know, you're so-and-so, and I remember you, and so on. You know, they were just little kids when they left here. It's about his age, really. You know, and 50 years ago, you know, that's fantastic. You know.
It was the 1930s, and it was in the Great Depression.
Well, the mood kicked the makshawak. The mood na janki awak stuff kick.
People called them squatters.
We ki I spwepchawak le vraj nat na kick. Tutan peshe ki awak makam St. Madeleine.
St. Madeleine was home.
We. Jemewi kaj kawani kewak.
Rejoicing, this is the day.
My father was from St. Madeleine, yeah. Father used to trap in the wintertime. He used to go trapping. He was our main provider for meat. He'd bring home the meat, and he'd skin everything, and Mom would do the cooking. Rabbits, muskrat, beaver, deer. Well, my mom's day used to start off around 4 in the morning. Like, her and Dad would get up at about the same time. And Dad would make the fire, and Mom would warm up the breakfast. Well, we went to church every Sunday. We had to. Mom and Dad made sure that we did go to church every Sunday.
This is the day that the Lord arose. Let us be glad and rejoice in it. This is the day that the Lord arose.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, le Seigneur soit avec vous. My dear brothers and sisters, we gather today to remember the past, to look at the present, and to pray for the future. Notre rassemblement ici aujourd'hui est plein d'un sens historique. Nous faisons la commémoration d'un village qui n'existe plus depuis 1938. Mais en même temps, nous célébrons une communauté de vie qui existe encore. Et le fait que nous sommes rassemblés ici ce matin en est la preuve. Un village est disparu, oui, mais une culture vit encore. Aujourd'hui, nous célébrons cette culture. Cette culture qui inclut un très grand et profond sens de Dieu et de fraternité parmi tous les peuples. Un village est disparu, mais des mémoires continuent à exister. Aujourd'hui, nous célébrons ces mémoires. These memories of sharing life together in this community, of sharing the experience of birth, of happiness, of sadness, of health, of illness, of death, and of life. We celebrate all of that today. My dear brothers and sisters, you have come here to remember the past. You've also come to become more who you are. And our culture and our faith, which is part of that culture, is extremely important in life. Today, you are strengthening your culture. Culture is like the roots of a tree. A tree that has no roots, that has no culture, is a weak tree. And when the storm and the wind comes, that tree falls over and dies. And so it is with human beings. Those that do not have deep roots in the past, in their culture, they are like trees that have no roots. And when the wind and the storm comes, they fall over and they die. It is obvious that you do have deep roots because your culture is still alive. The village has disappeared, the houses have disappeared, but the community is alive.
Hallelujah.
Métis families settled permanently in this area in the 1890s. However, Métis hunters were present in this region in the early 1800s. Both Fort Ellis and Carlton Trail are located near St. Madeleine. The mission of St. Madeleine was established in 1902 by Father Gilles de Corby. A log church was built by the residents in 1913. It became the main location of the community's religious and social celebrations. At its peak in the late 1920s, over 400 Métis lived in St. Madeleine, and its people survived by digging Seneca root, cutting shrub, and working as hired labor on the surrounding farms. Some managed successfully on their own farms. They experienced a life rich in Métis culture, united by language, faith, music, and shared hardship. Belleville School was built in 1922, and grades 1 to 8 taught until 1939. When the last families left the area, the people of St. Madeleine were dispersed from 1938 to 1940 by the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration, the PFRA. The land was fenced in and used as pasture.
And each other. Give them eternal rest. Let us pause in a moment of silent prayer, remembering all those who have been buried here. May Almighty God bless this cemetery, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I was born in this St. Madeleine myself in March 1925, March 30th. And we were a big family. There were 11 of us kids. And most of us, the oldest ones, like my two sisters and I, never got much schooling. I remember about 30 families living here as a kid. People here were poor them days, but I can say everybody was happy and everybody had enough to eat. And I remember a lot of good things about this place myself, because people were friendly. And furthermore, we learned to respect. We learned to respect each other. And there was a lot going here, even though the people didn't have much, but they all cared. They all cared and they shared.
I was born here in St. Madeleine, and we lived here on the 7th year. We lost one of my sister, a little baby, and then right after that, my mother died. They're both buried in here, and we were very, very lonesome. We didn't know what to do. We were made a living anyway. My dad was working. We were all young. We were 3 of us kids. They all died now. I'm the only one that's left. And we went away from here. We moved away towards Grandview, followed the Indian Trail with 2 teams. My grandfather was with us at that time too, my dad's dad. And we stayed in Grandview, digging Seneca out in there, try to make it go. So we stayed in there for a while, but we could never forget this St. Madeleine.
These events were started way back in when the first voyageurs used to come in from the east, from Montreal. They paddled their canoe all day up the Great Lakes, up the rivers, and down this end of this beautiful country we have here today. And every night they would stop, and of course there was no TV then, or no other. They did their own entertainment. So they start, after petting the canoe all day, they find out who was still the strongest man. So they do a bit of arm wrestling to twist a few arms.
Got a winner.
And also back in the olden days, they didn't want to do that, so they did some other entertainment like leg wrestling. Again, they lay down on the ground and they hooked their ankles and rolled the other guys over. That was entertainment too. You don't need no skill for that. All you need is a strong leg. And that would keep the people entertained all night too. I guess back in the voyageur days, they didn't have that. You must have two stump or something. And they'd stand on there about 10, 12 feet apart, use a rope, and you pull your opponent off the barrel. Log sign. There. If you need some firewood, now's the time to bring your log, and the boys will cut your firewood for you. You're going to see how fast some guys can cut firewood. You have these, of course, they're only 4x4s now. Back in the olden days, they didn't use 4x4s. They used whatever log they could find. Long strokes, and you'll get it done. Hurry up.
My name is Lionel Bellimer. And like they said, I'd like to know what we used to do for entertainment. Well, we had lots of entertainment. Myself, I liked horses, and I used to ride a lot of horses. I even used to ride steers, and then milk cows. And then, then we used to play ball in summertime. We never missed a Sunday. We used to play ball. We had a pretty good ball team here. Well, we used to come down, so we had a lot of fun when I was a kid. And as far as the dances, well, we used to play ball till dark. Then we had an old fellow by the name of Jonah Bess, just south here. Then everybody had a lunch, and then we'd go to his place, and we had lots of fiddlers. Then we'd dance all night there Sunday night. We had a lot of fun.
I used to have weekends here. Right in this little opening here, that's where the dance used to be. There's a pool room in there. And then so we used to open up that pool room and have dance there every night. We used to have homebrew. That fellow made some homebrew, and every Saturday he had a bunch, and we used to buy that. That's all there was to drink, because there was no government liquor at that time. But he made that stuff, and he also made some beer. They used to call it piquette, and then we drink that at the end, when we were short of that homebrew.
Every Saturday you used to come to a dance in here. We used to fight, me and Paul Fleury, and I used to get a licking.
And Jean-Baptiste de Montigny. There's a man that could walk to Binscarth and pick up his groceries. He had a 100-pound bag on his back of flour and a box under his arm, and walked home from Binscarth, and I don't think he ever stopped to rest. He just walked poker straight back, and he stepped right along. I would say 4.5 miles an hour. Then we got Rainbow Pete, old Pete the Charm. He lived out here too. And it was Pete the Charm that I ate muskrat and beaver. I've had a variety of foods. I'm probably the last gopher eater in the country. Don't laugh, I did eat gopher. Mrs. Louis Tanner, used to cook us gopher in the spring of the year. We caught them across the road from her place there, and we'd bring them into her, and she'd prepare them for us, and we'd have a feast on gopher. First thing in the spring, they come out of their holes.
Well, we had rababoo and bannock.
What's rababoo?
Rababoo, that's stew made out of rabbit. And you'd have some potatoes in there, and she'd mix some flour in it.
Was it good?
Tastes pretty good, yeah. the bannock she used to make was East cake bannock. Like at night before she'd go to bed, she'd punch in her dough with using yeast. And then when she'd get up in the morning around 5, she'd start punching her bannock out and cooking it. It's kind of, we never did have any bread. Or she wouldn't cook bread. She didn't know how to cook baked bread anyway. So our jam was from the berries we used to pick in the summer. Like the choke cherries, my mom used to grind them together with 2 rocks. She'd bang them and turn them into patties, and she'd set them on top the roof of the house in order to dry, and then after they dried, she'd put them away for the winter. I know she used to boil them in water and put sugar in them, and then she'd add some flour in that. I don't know what you'd call that. Some kind of a pudding.
We would gather some people and go to somebody's house, like Joe Van's house or Joe Bushy's house. That's my godfather, Joe Bushy. And my mom's house. My house was too small. And then we'd meet there, and then we'd gather some people and go, like, Jake and them, or fiddle and all night long, and in the morning have lunch, go again. Boy, we used to do those things. I'm still going.
Thanks a lot, you guys, all you jiggers.
That's my partner.